Well, good morning, everyone. Good to see you back. Week 5. We'll get started. We've got a lot to cover today, and we're going to be covering integrating mindful awareness throughout the workday, which I think is one of the biggest challenges because we're all so busy at work. And that includes mindful communication with colleagues and just paying more attention to listening, communicating. So we'll cover some of that too. We've got a couple of videos to show you. Hopefully we'll be able to fit those in. And I'm going to send you at the end of the class the usual slides and recording link, but also something called My Mindfulness Plan, where you can sort of map out. And now you probably already have, hopefully by now, some idea of what you do when during the day, some formal mixed with some informal practices. But the plan is just kind of a way to chart that out. So I will send that with the rest of the stuff this afternoon. And I would encourage you to use that to write it down so that it's sort of your plan going forward. Next week will be our last week, and it'll be week 6. And then we will have a booster session probably about a month later. I always try to do that at the same time. So Thursday, about a month later at noon. All right, so let's start with a mindful minute and just take a moment to pause. And for this quick pause, you can close your eyes if you like, but you don't have to. You can be sitting, but again, you don't have to. It's one of the pauses that can be meant to do on the go. And we'll just start by settling in and checking in with ourselves. Taking a moment to turn inward and ask, how am I doing? This is the 3-minute breathing space. So how am I doing right now? And just kind of notice what comes up in the way of thoughts, feelings, and body sensations. They may not always come up in that order, but so just keeping your awareness open to be aware of thoughts, feelings, and body sensations when you ask yourself that question, how am I doing? How's it going for me right now? And sometimes we see a connection between those three, sometimes not. And so just paying attention, being open and curious. And then we turn our attention to our breath and maybe taking a deep breath or two so that we're feeling the breath going in and out and we're allowing the body to relax a little bit, giving ourselves permission to relax and using the breath as an anchor so that whenever you get distracted, which you will, our minds carry us off. So whenever you notice that, just coming back to the anchor of the breath, continuing to follow the sensations of breathing in and out. And then the final step is to kind of open the awareness to sense the whole body sitting here from head to toe, the posture, the feeling of the whole body breathing. And even beyond that, if you like, what's around the body, kind of to the sides, in front and in back and above and below, just opening up and expanding your awareness, continuing to breathe. And we bring this expanded awareness to the next moments of the day. All right, so that's our quick pause. Again, that was the 3-minute breathing space, which I introduced you to a couple of sessions ago. But that's a good one. That's one to keep in your repertoire in a sense of especially responding to stress or just doing it on a regular basis, just as a mindful check-in. So how did it go last week? Just wanted to open it up and ask, how are you doing? So you can either use the chat or speak up. But last week, remember, we covered the emotions, how they show up in our meditation, sometimes difficult emotions, challenging kinds of things. Rain can help with that. We also did an equanimity practice, which a lot of teachers say that the regular practice of doing this, which hopefully we're getting into that routine, helps develop this sense of equanimity, of being calm, of being not reactive, and kind of being able to step into the eye of the hurricane. Don't think I did that meditation, but there is a recording of that. Maybe you tried it. So I'm curious, how's it been going? See one chat here. I found it really helpful when you said, put space between you and your thoughts. Okay, good. Yeah. And, it's interesting when we learn to look at our thoughts and step back from them a little bit and really watch our thinking, think about our thinking. Sometimes there is space between the thoughts. And that's kind of one of the reasons why sometimes you'll hear in a breathing meditation, notice the space between your in and out breath and your out and in breath. We're looking for those micro moments of space. And the 3-minute breathing space and the stop practice are all ways to do that. But I really think what's fascinating is when we really pay attention to our thoughts, we can see that thoughts are just sort of mental events coming and going. Sometimes we don't have a lot of control over what pops into the mind. And so, yeah, that's good that you're noticing the space. Trying to think about the here and now at any given moment or time that I need to. Good. So, yeah, that's great, because that says to me that you're reminding yourself to be mindful, I think is what you're saying. Or time that I need to. I think that means time that maybe that you need to do a mindful pause or do a mindful exercise. And that's really the whole trick of it, is reminding ourselves. And when it really just gives us the choice, so that maybe you remind yourself and you go, you know what, I gotta pay attention to this email that I'm working on. And maybe it's just one deep breath and then move on to the focus that you're on. Taking a minute to name my emotions, excellent, helps me with perspective, so I do not react but respond. Yeah, that is exactly the point of that with both thoughts and especially with emotions. Usually we think emotions, all emotions are valid. And again, I think emotions are a great way to understand what to pay attention to in the moment. Why am I feeling that anxiety or anger or irritation or restlessness or whatever it is? Mindfulness gives us a chance to explore that a little bit. Whereas before, I think we would just tend to maybe see it, but move on, not really pay any mindful attention to it. And being able to respond rather than react is the key. And experimenting with box breathing, good. So box breathing as I know it, to help with anxiety and stress. Yeah, you might all try this. I haven't talked about this myself, but box breathing is, I think what you mean is breathing evenly to the count of usually like 4 or 5. So you breathe into 4 or 5. You can pause for 4. Let's do it with 4. Then you breathe out for 4. You hold for 4, and then you continue that pattern. Yeah, that's another way to consider. There's different kinds of breathing. So the ones that I've introduced you to are really just some of the whole gamut that's out there. So try different ones. Try ones that work for you. Sounds like that's working for you, especially if it's helping with anxiety and stress. I had challenging emotions with stress and increased responsibilities at work last week. I really needed to ask for support from a few friends and share my thoughts and feelings. I'm still processing and feeling better. and being gentle with what I feel and not judging myself. Also feeling I'm doing the best I can and it is good enough. Mindfulness has really helped me. Yeah, thanks, Roberta. There's an awful lot in that comment, and shows a great range of awareness, I think. And one thing that pops out to me is that when we have a challenging week with lots of emotions, number one, reaching out, that's great. So being aware that reaching out will help. And number two, realizing that it's a process. I'm still processing and feel better. It's not like these things aren't going to like automatically take it away, but they really help us be a little bit more aware and control of our responses. And that is the key. And the third point that we're really going to talk about next week is being gentle with what I feel, not judging myself. So in other words, self-compassion. And we're going to talk about that next week. So looking forward to that. Doing the best I can. Yep, excellent. Great comments, everybody. Thank you for that feedback. So let's move on because we do have a lot to cover. So did you learn to surf a bit last week? Remember we talked about it helps us navigate the choppy waters and learn how to surf and not be tossed around by them. That's sort of the metaphor. Hopefully you learned that you can navigate those turbulent waters and apply that. Sounds like that's what you were saying, Roberta, about a challenging week, and we surf rather than get tossed under and tossed all around. So I put this quote in by the Buddha. Again, this is not a Buddhism course, but of course, a lot of mindfulness practice emanates from there. And just introduce the idea of mindful communication. So just give you a chance to read that. And I'm going to mute everybody for now, because we are going to talk a little bit towards the end of the session, although actually, so we have the Buddha, and then in contrast, we have Dilbert. So I'll give you a chance to read this funny cartoon, but it kind of says it all in modern day communication with our cell phones. We get beeped, we get buzzed, we get chirped. You hear all sorts of little notifications that pull our attention. And that's why it feels like we all have ADHD. So funny that Dilbert is saying that there are these studies that we're losing our ability to focus. And of course, he's distracted, and then Dilbert gets distracted. So no communication whatsoever. They're like ships passing in the middle of the night. So we are going to turn our attention, but first we're going to talk about pausing, which we've talked quite a bit about, but the session today is really being intentional about these periodic pauses as you read this quote by Joyce Brothers. And that would be great. 5 minutes every hour. Wouldn't it be great if we could do that? Oh, and this is such a great point. Thank you, Roberta. People expect the response right away, and it is not good for us. That is a huge problem. And I think if we automatically respond, though, and so kind of today's session is a lot about choice. People expect the response, especially, you might want to, people expect things from you in your job, your boss does, your coworkers do, but you always have a choice. You can pause, and that's what these pauses are about, instead of reflexively responding. And so taking these little breaks help us do what? Well, they help us, and I know you've seen this quote before. Remember, the idea here and the goal is to make relaxation and mindfulness routine, right? All these practices are going to help us make them a habit, so that when that email comes in or that text or whatever it is, and we feel automatically, oh yeah, I got to respond immediately. Well, that's time for a micropause. That means you can tap into that peaceful state because you've been doing the practices. You can do that more easily. And that just gives you that whole thing that we talked about a minute ago of responding, not reacting. Okay, so that is the point. You still may choose to respond to that email or whatever it is. There are important things you have to prioritize, of course, but maybe there's something else that you need to do before you do that, like take care of yourself, take maybe a bodily need, maybe a deep breath or a stretch or getting a glass of water, or thinking through the 3 or 10 or 20 things that you got to do and prioritizing them. We're going to talk about multitasking in a minute and how that is a trap that gets us into trouble too. Yes, it would be lovely. I'm just reading the comment. It would be lovely to be able to do that every hour. So I think for most of us, we can't do that every hour, but you could do something every hour. You could train yourself to do a micro pause, a deep breath, or some sort of quick pause, maybe not 5 minutes, maybe 5 minutes every, 2 hours or 3 hours. But you could do something every hour. And that's sort of the point of integrating it into the workday. And here are a few things to be thinking about. There is actually a mindful driving recording that you can listen to if you do commute. I know some of us are still working from home. Some of us have hybrid schedules and some of us commute still all the time. I used to do this all the time when I commuted 5 days a week. It is a great way to disengage with the automatic chatter and the to-do list and all the stuff that comes up. You can pay attention to the driving. Of course, you have to do that, but you can also pay attention to the driving itself, the right from the moment you get into the car, opening the door, settling in behind the wheel, sitting and know you're sitting, feel your feet on the brake pedal and the gas pedal, feel your hands on the wheel. You get the idea. It's the whole sensory experience. And when you start driving, there's a lot to pay attention to. So mindful driving, I think, can really make us better drivers. And I would also say part of this is to slow down a little bit. So often we're rushing and hurrying, and that just exacerbates what's going on in our mind. So taking part of your commute, 5 or 10 minutes, to mindfully drive, pay attention to the sounds, the feeling of the car moving and stopping, and what's going on at the stoplight, what's going through your mind about why isn't that person moving? The light is green, getting stuck behind school buses and garbage trucks and all of those things. We can mindfully pay attention to the chatter and not respond or not react to it, but step back from it, notice your thoughts, notice the emotions. It's a great training ground for being mindful. Notice the judgments. Why is that person driving like that? They're not driving as good as I am. And of course, somebody else is probably saying that about you at the same moment. So mindful driving at the beginning or the end of the day is a great way to put that into your routine. At the end of the day, you can make it a transition ritual. We talked about some things like paying attention to the good. So at the end of the day, you might bring to mind what went well during the day. What are 3 things that went well, instead of focusing on what didn't go so well. Or a transition ritual can mean like when you get into your car and you cross a certain bridge or some landmark, that's the transition point at which you let go of the stress of the workday and you pay attention to what's going on right here and now, and you make an intention to move into the rest of your day with that mindful focus, leaving the workday behind. That's a transition ritual. Or it could be when you change your clothes, you're out of your work clothes, or I don't know, have a snack. There's so many different little things that you can do that can trigger the end of the workday, leaving the stress behind and moving on. There are some examples of mindful pauses. There is a 2-minute pause on the recordings that you'll see on the mindfulness page of the links where they go. There are some really quick pauses on the M Life app that you might want to try. There are some, what is it called? I think it's called Brief Mindfulness. I can't remember the exact name, but you'll see it if you just scroll down. They're like 2 and 3 minute exercises. 3 breaths for a pause, which we've done, and then the 3-minute breathing space or stop. These are all perfect ways, or even just a little deep breathing to pause in between emails or in between meetings. And then there's, of course, approaching a meeting. You know, usually when we go to a meeting, we're thinking about what's on our agenda. What do we have to get across? What's the expectation that we have to bring to the meeting? Well, what you might try is, as you approach the meeting, maybe you're walking to a meeting, or maybe you're walking to your Zoom or Teams meeting, whatever it is, pay attention to what's going on right there. Instead of letting the mind go off and work overtime, again, bring yourself to the here and now, give yourself that pause, let the mind rest, and then start to think about your agenda, what you want to get across. But also think about what the agenda of the meeting is and mindful listening. That's where we will talk about listening skills, how important that is to do that mindfully. And then mindful breaks. So I'm going to show you, we're going to ask you to think about that in a minute or two. But here again, just some examples of simple, easy practices that you can do throughout the day. So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is using your senses. So you do 5 things that you can see. So just looking around, 5 things that you can see, 5 separate things. There's my coffee cup. I'm looking out the window. I'm looking at the calendar. I'm looking at the Zoom thingy. And I'm looking at a book. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 4 different sensations, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. So try that. It's a great grounding practice. Meditate on the Go is a link, so you can follow that when I send these out. But the link is hand tracing. So you use your hand and you take the other hand and you just trace the fingers. So as you go up each finger, you could breathe in. So in and out. In and out for each finger. Okay. Do that all the way across. And then if you have time, you can go back. And it not only grounds us because we're breathing, we're regulating our breathing, but you feel the tactile sense of tracing your hand. Same thing with feel your feet. So feel your feet on the ground, just really take a moment to explore your feet, the sense of touch. You can explore each toe if you like, or the feeling of the heels and the balls of your feet touching the ground. So again, that's just another quickie. Forest bathing article, I'll try to remember to send this. I'm going to be sending you a lot today. But a lot of people talk about walking, and that's a great mindfulness practice, and it is. The forest bathing article is all about immersing ourselves in the forest, really, again, using the senses, paying attention to all the different things that you see, hear, smell, sense, again, just really immersing yourself. It's a Japanese concept, so you might try that as well. And then there's another meditative story podcast. If you haven't checked this out, it's really a good podcast. The stories, they usually last about 20 minutes, the whole thing. Sometimes I break it up, but what they are very interesting stories about usually celebrities, not like really famous people, but a person will tell a story about a turning point in their life, for example, that usually has some sort of meditative or introspective aspect of what they've learned about themselves. But then the host also interjects and will pause the story and ask you, how are you feeling? What are you sensing at the moment? What does this story bring up for you? And then at the end, there's often a brief meditation. So it's a great way to mingle storytelling with some meditative and mindfulness practices. And then the final link here is there was a New York Times Fresh Start 10-day challenge, which I think actually was from last year. Hopefully that's still an active link, but that has some really great suggestions. So the problem with taking breaks, that 5 minutes that we talked about, it's so hard to carve it out of your day. I get that. I know it's hard for me too on most days. But try blocking out, try some different ways to carve out the boundary, whether it's putting it on your calendar or putting a visual reminder or whatever helps, maybe a reminder that comes across on your phone. Do something that at least reminds you. And then, like I said, you can take the choice of whether or not you're going to do something or not, or just plow back into work. So these other points, these are just some suggestions, but taking our focus off work, letting the mind relax, taking a walk, a stretch, snack with a coworker, and then noting your energy. Notice the difference that it makes. And that's really the key. If it's helpful, keep doing it. But notice the things that really work for you. So we know that breaks work for us, but many of us don't take a lot of good breaks. What do you do for your lunch break, for example? That's a good one to think about. But this last point is so important. Try to preemptively take a break. In other words, do something before you feel depleted. Most people will get to the point of exhaustion and feeling depleted, and then they go, yeah, I need a break. But the point here is to do that before you get depleted. And that can really make a difference. All right, so here's one of the videos. I'm going to actually, hopefully, you know what, I forgot to, I'm going to stop the share for a second and then bring it up again because I need to optimize the video. All right, so hopefully you're going to be able to see this and hear this. Let me get it started. And it's not working. So let's try something else. Here's a pause. So as I'm trying to get this going, what are you doing with this pause? What can you do with your breath, with feeling your body, with feeling your feet, whatever it is? All right, let's try it again. Here we go. This is about multitasking, as you can see. Hopefully you can, just a little music in the background, but you don't really need that. There's a problem at all with the video or the audio. This part, of course, gets into the mindful communication. Texting and driving, good example of this one. So that's where it's from, stressfree.org. Dr. Amit Sood from, I think it's from the Mayo Clinic. And so here are the links. There's a couple more links if you want to watch them. 5 ways to be mindful at work and energizing breathing, which is kind of an interesting technique. If you feel fatigued and like sluggish, this is a quick breathing technique to kind of get stimulated again. So you might want to try that. But the point with, obviously, with the multitasking video is to be aware of it, you know, and to realize that when we're really multitasking on complex conscious tasks, our brain is just really toggling back and forth. So that's what's so exhausting. That's why we get to the end of the day, when we're multitasking all day long, it not only taxes the brain, which it really does drain energy out of the brain, but it affects the body as well. So kind of keep that in mind. Try to some of those tips. If you have to multitask, do it with, you know, if you're doing something else that's doesn't require a lot of mindful attention, you can do that. You know, and we'll talk a little bit more about mindful communication, but you know, when we're trying to do that when somebody's talking to us, that doesn't work, you know, really doesn't. So here are just some examples of quick pauses, just to give you some things to think about. Oh yeah, I could maybe take a deep breath before I hit send, or, you know, I'm doing emails, or using a password to remind you, or breathing mindfully while waiting. There's all sorts of these little waiting, just sometimes they're only 10 seconds, but there are still chances where we can take a break. Notice your body. That's always a great way to, you know, feel and touch, get out of your head into your body. And then again, send yourself a reminder. I found that very, very helpful. All right, so at this point, what I'd like to do is a meditation. And the whole idea of the meditation here, which is called taking the weight off your mind, is to move from the human doing, which we are most of the day, into human being, to bring ourselves into the being mode. And really, any of the meditations that we've done help us do that. And so some of this is actually going to be a good reminder of some of the things that we've done before. Yes, that's a good comment. I'm just reading Katie's comment here. The phrase meaningful experience stuck out to me. If we aren't conscious of one moment, yeah, you know, that is probably the essence of what this is all about. One of the quotes from John Kabat-Zinn talks about that mindfulness practice really helps us live fully in each moment. And yeah, I mean, you can't do that 100% of the time, but boy, we can sure increase the moments that we've been missing. So that's what all these practices are about, is to help us come back more in contact, to be aware of those moments. So let's take the weight off your mind, and let's get into a position. This will probably take, let's see, Let's do maybe 5 or 6 minutes. So this is when your mind gets heavy or burdened with thoughts. So sit comfortably in a position, balanced, at ease, and alert. Let your shoulders relax and drop. Relax your hands. And imagine any tension leaving through your fingertips. Try wiggling them and release any tension out of the fingertips. That's the first step. Now, this can be done with the eyes open or closed, but whatever you're, again, most comfortable with. Then we sense into the legs. You might move them a little bit, wiggle the toes or the feet, and imagine any tension in the lower half of the body seeping out of your toes and feet. So that's the first step, just letting any obvious tension kind of go. We let go as best we can. Now, sometimes our brains can be overloaded with thoughts, and thoughts can often go round and round, right? We might have conversations and events that we review from the past that we keep replaying, or we might have conversations or events that we imagine in the future that we make projections about. We might conjure up multiple scenarios where we try to fix things or right or wrong. What we plan to say can go round and round in our heads. I think we all experience that, right, at times. These can feel like a waterfall of thoughts in our heads, and they can interrupt our mindful focus. They can even interrupt our sleep. They can occupy our minds so that we do feel heavy and scattered, and they keep us from being focused and creative. We can be weighed down by these mind waterfalls, and it can feel like we're carrying a heavy load on our shoulders and back, which can even lead to neck and back and shoulder pain. So it's best if we let them go, if we can, and clear them out. Meditation itself can help us do this, and we can learn to choose which thoughts we allow and put our attention on, and which we let go of, learning which are helpful and which are unhelpful. So we can choose one of several ways as we meditate. So first, we'll breathe together. First, feel the breath coming in and out of your body. Just let the breath breathe itself. Imagine your breath is starting in your belly below the navel, and as you breathe, the breath comes up through your diaphragm, your chest, your neck, and into your head. And as you breathe out, letting the out-breath be longer than the in-breath, let the breath carry your thoughts out of your head, down through the neck, chest, and belly, all the way down through your feet and out of the toes and soles of your feet. So try that a couple times. Breathing in from below in the lower part of the belly, breath comes all the way up to the head, and then kind of picks up all those heavy, stressful thoughts and releases them as you breathe out, releases them right out of the body. Do that a couple more times. And now we'll try to use a repetitive phrase. Be calm. So on the in-breath, say the word be, and on the out-breath, calm. And just repeat that 2 or 3 times. Be calm. All right. Now, a third method is to bring to mind the source of your upset or thoughts. And we will send that person or event or situation a positive, caring message. So imagine a beam of love or caring coming from your heart to that person or event. Or you can use the phrase, may you be well, may you be safe, may you be at peace. So we're kind of aiming our attention with a positive, caring message to that person involved in this stressful situation or event, the event itself. And either imagining this beam of care or using the frame or both, using the phrase, may you be well, may you be safe, may you be at peace. And now sending yourself that same message. May I be well. May I be safe. May I be at peace. And the final one we'll try is, if the thoughts going round and round in your head are about a future event or an interaction when you're rehearsing an imagined dialogue, go out further into the future, imagining that dialogue. And after what has been said is said, imagine a really successful outcome. And every time what you want to say comes back into your mind, just think about that successful, positive outcome. Try that for a moment. Now, all these techniques can be used individually or in combination. So, play around with them, try them. And when you're ready, if your eyes have been closed, you can open them and finish that meditation. And that's taking the weight off your mind. And again, like anything, it takes some practice. You've got to try some of these. There is a recording on the EFR website. There's a link to this, so you can try that. So I want to turn right now to the sacred art of listening. And the listening mindful exercise is simply this. If I had you in a classroom, we'd try this actually with each other. But for now, what I'd like you to do, this could be one of the exercises that you try. You can try this with somebody, maybe your mindful buddy, or with somebody at work. And all you do is each person talks for about 2 minutes. And it could be about anything. It doesn't have to be anything important. It could be about what you're going to do this weekend or something fun that you have planned or anything like that. And one person talks for 2 minutes and the other person just listens. That's it. Listen as attentively as possible. Try to catch the meaning of what's being talked about. Try to understand some of the feelings that are going on. So in other words, active listening, but you're not responding at all. That's the kind of the hard part about it. For 2 minutes, just listen. No response. Just listen. And you'll see it's hard because usually we want to interact. We want to interject. Even if it's active listening, we want to say what we want to say as well. And that's one of the things that gets in the way is we're rehearsing, we're kind of going over what's going on in our mind and what we want to say. The exercise is all about 100% listening to that other person. And then what you could try at the end is reflecting at the end, here's what I heard you say. Okay, so, and then you might have captured it, or the person might say, no, that's not exactly right, but here's what I was trying to say. So try that. That's really a useful exercise. And realize how important and the power of our words are. This second bullet point here. Those few words that you said that made you happy, that you said to somebody, that really made a difference. a positive difference. You could tell, right? Or conversely, those words that you said to someone that you really wish you hadn't said, you kind of wish they come out of your mouth and you kind of wish you could pull them back in. We all do that too. So begin to work with conscious speech. What you're saying, positive or negative, being aware of the impact that those words will have and the power of those words. So again, that kind of goes back to the poem from the Buddha. The basic rules are to say what is true and that which is helpful or kind. Now, there are two videos. What I want to do is I want to show one of them. You'll be able to watch the other one on your own. The first one I'm going to pass up, actually. The Sacred Art of Listening. It's a story that Tara Brach tells. And the story itself goes from the 5.5 minute mark to the 10.5 minute mark. So listen to that. It's about a Jesuit priest who is in a very tight situation, is not really fully listening. But the second one I want to show, because it really, Frank Ostaseski talks about deep listening, and it really gives a good way to do that.
So good. The most violent parts of Los Angeles.
That's Tara. I'm going to move to the next one though, if it lets me. Come on. I might have to escape out of that. Yep. Videos sometimes. Here we go. Again, this is only 3 minutes. So we'll finish this and then I'll show you what this is really good. 3-minute video.
We really underestimate the power of human presence and how that human presence can be expressed through listening. We really underestimate this. And I think also not just the value that it has for the person who's being listened to, but also how it brings us into contact. Good listening brings us into contact with ourselves and with this moment. When I work with young nurses who are sometimes overwhelmed by the situations that they meet, the demands of the system or the difficulties of working with a particular patient. I think of one young nurse, for example, who would stay with a particular patient, and when she would leave the patient, she would come home and she would just reflect and reverberate, really. She was like a reverberating chamber, rolling around the suffering of this experience of this particular patient. And she came back into work the next day and she told her supervisor, and her supervisor said, "You need better boundaries." And what the young nurse understood that to mean is that she should withdraw more from this patient who she really cared for and really loved. And so that's what she did. She gradually withdrew, and when the woman died, she felt tremendously guilty. If we had taught that young nurse to just listen differently, she would have been able to stay present with the suffering and also stay balanced in herself. One of the models that we use in listening is to teach people how to listen from their heads, their hearts, and their bodies. When we listen from the head, we listen for content, we listen for the story, and we cultivate our wisdom and clarity and discernment. When we listen from the heart, we listen for the emotional flavor, and we cultivate our altruism and compassion and love. And when we listen from the body, we cultivate our intuition and also our presence. Because you see, the mind and the heart can be swept away into the past or the future, but the body is always here. If it's not, we're in trouble, huh? So when we teach young nurses how to really sense their body, how to really feel the sensations of their body, that gives them a much greater access to their emotional life and a much greater access to the clarity of their mind. So that 3-center check-in, we call it, head, heart, and body. If we could teach nurses to learn to listen from those different centers, they would have a more complete kind of listening. They would be able to stay more balanced in their own selves, and it would be much more available to the people that they serve.
Okay, well, hopefully he's very soft-spoken. Hopefully you could hear all that okay, but you do have the link if you want to go back and listen to that again. but I just find that very helpful as a 3-step method and very much mindfulness based. He's a great teacher, by the way, just got some very good stuff. He actually works in a hospice setting. And so he's talks about staying mindfully present with people as they're going through the death process. But anyway, he's great. And hopefully you could hear that okay. So here are the daily practices for the coming week. Formal practices, you can really freely choose between any of the main practices we've done. So whatever you either like or maybe something you want to try again, there's a lot of different choices here. And that second point, try not to think of this as another chore or task that you must do in your to-do list. Experiment still with different times to try these, see how they fit into your day, and maybe try something to be creative and flexible. The informal practices, mindful driving, you could try that, or some of the mindful pauses, or if you do a lot of meetings, maybe mindful meetings. Remember that 3-minute breathing space. It's really an excellent tool. And then there is a communication calendar. If you're going to try some of the mindful communication practices, you might just jot down what that was like. So I'll send that too. And then the final thing, I do have the mindfulness plan, which simply is a basic little chart. You'll see it when you get it that says you plan to do these specific, you don't have to do them all, but pick 1 or 2 formal practices that you're going to do and when, and a few informal practices to supplement the formal. So here you have the links. There's that taking the weight off your mind. If you want to listen to the driving one, then there's the pause. It's like 2 minutes in the mindful meetings. And then this quote, which is great. Don't think the purpose of meditation is to go deep into consciousness, wrap a blanket around yourself and say, oh, how cozy. I'm going to curl up here all by myself and let the world burn. Not at all. We go deep into meditation so that we can reach out further and further to the world outside. So there's going to be some other readings. So the videos are really optional, but there's a few things. There's a couple of things on mindfulness at work. And then also there's a handout on relationships and mindful communication. So great. So I'm glad you're looking forward to that. Any questions before I let you all go? I'll stop the share and say thank you. Sorry I ran over a little bit, but thank you all very much for coming again. And next week is the last week, which is amazing. 6 weeks goes really fast. So hopefully you're finding some good regular practice times for yourself, both formally and informally, and wish you the best as you go through the rest of your week. And I'll see you next Thursday. And as always, let me know if you have any questions or anything at all. I'm happy to help out with any questions that come up. So take it easy. Have a great week. Thanks so much.